Hi folks, Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about jury trials. Can we continue using jury trials? Now, jury trials are under assault from all sides. The progressive activist left, the feminists and the radicals, they don't want jury trials. But also minorities that are being flooded into the West by the globalist cabal. They have no history or context or understanding of trial by jury of facts and evidence. That doesn't even exist in their culture in the same way as it does in the West. And they haven't developed along those lines. Organically, left to themselves, they would never have developed a legal system as you see in the West based on facts and evidence. And on various studies that have been done around the Western world, and done rather quietly, and the media isn't really talking about it, is that if there's a convicted black man that's in trial, and the jury is a black or majority black, or where a unanimous verdict's required on the jury, where there are black people, they will not vote to convict the black guy. Now, in some cases they do, but depending on whose sort of numbers you look at, between 75 and 85% of the time, the black juror will not vote to convict or decide to convict the black guy. Now, this is regardless of evidence. Even if the black guy, there's a million witnesses, video evidence from 100 different angles and this and that. The guy's even confessed and so on. Still, the black juror won't vote to convict in approximately 80% or so of the time. Now, the reverse is the case, though, where the black juror has a white guy who's the defendant in there, and it's almost exactly the reverse. In 80% of cases, the black guy will vote to convict. The black juror, rather, will vote to convict the white guy, the accused, the white accused guy. Now, we see this across the spectrum. Wherever if there are Afghani people, on the jury, or any third world, Indian, Bangladeshi, it doesn't matter. They vote on juries anyway. They decide very tribally. They're ever ready to assume the guilt of the white guy, no matter how flimsy the evidence, but they're ever ready to vote to acquit the Bangladeshi, if they're Bangladeshi, the Bangladeshi guy, they vote to acquit them even if the evidence is damning. Now, we see cases like this all the time, but they tend to get sort of swept under the rug. Now, the jury system is getting accosted from a number of sides, attacked from a number of sides. One very basic one is, look, a lot of these legal cases are quite complicated, and most jurors can't understand what's going on, so they have to decide based on very simplistic understandings of complex issues, or whether they like the look of someone's face or not. So juries, or that's why courtrooms are often turned into circuses, because the legal teams have to sway and influence jurors that are just too stupid to understand the issues. So they have to engage in theatrics to do it. Therefore, what's the point of having juries if they can't understand? Other arguments say, well, you need jurors who have got 100 plus IQ, otherwise you are wasting your time, or jurors that have expertise in a certain area. For example, if I don't know if the say a bridge collapses, for an example, then you would try and get people who've had some sort of expertise in construction or engineering, whatever, who would understand the issues. You similarly run the risk that because they're smaller communities, they may know each other or know someone who knows someone. So, which can, again, compromise things. But that's not the primary. There's two primary areas where the jury system is under attack, or three, I would argue. Firstly, is the globalists want to have control of the legal system and get the outcomes and the verdicts that they want. They want to be able to plan ahead and say, okay, that judge there will decide in the way we want them to, and it's a judge-only trial. So the globalists want that level of control, and they infect the legal system with their globalist activists and so on. So they don't want juries because it introduces a wild card effect. They don't know which way the jury might jump, and the globalists, if anything, they want decided, predetermined, bankable outcomes in legal cases. The facts be screwed. They want those outcomes. Now we come to the more wild card end of things again, where if the jury ends up being, again, you've got a black jury or mostly black jury, or where a majority is required, so just one holdout can result in a guilty verdict or an acquittal, a innocent verdict or whatever. So the black guy is accused of a crime. The black juror is put up in a sort of racial, ideological, in-group preference miasma. My people have been oppressed by slavery and Jim Crow and why? How come black people aren't presidents of all the big banks on the big bucks? How come I never got those hot white chicks? How come I never had a waterfront property? How come I never had a yacht moored out on it's got to be because of racism. I mean, what else can it be? I'm being held down by Whitey. So that black guy has been accused. He's being held down by Whitey. He's a victim of Whitey. So I'm not going to let Whitey push him around anymore. And I can do my bit for fighting back against those white fascists, KKK, Nazi, Hitlers, So I'm going to vote innocent. But the guy is dead to rights. I mean, he is so totally guilty. Well, yeah, he's kind of guilty of this crime, but you have to widen, you have to look at it more broadly. His great grandfather was enslaved. So we have to play restorative justice here. We have to let him off, even though he's guilty of this. It doesn't really matter because all the injustices that were done to his descendants and relatives going back hundreds of years, we have to kind of let him off because of that and because of slavery and this and so there's the miasma issue, the ideological miasma, and the tort. We have to let him off because his great grandfather was once enslaved. But he's enslaved by black people. Not the white people bought him off the black people. They didn't enslave him. It doesn't matter. White is the oppressor. There's only one thing I understand here. White is the oppressor. Black is the victim. That's all I understand. That's how I'm going to view this legal. So now, this miasma effect, ideological miasma, seeps into many other areas of law. For example, divorce law. Women have been oppressed for centuries by men. Centuries, women have been oppressed by men. They used to be the property of men. So we have to fight back against that injustice. We have to fight back against what happened 1,000 and 2,000 and 3,000 years ago, and we can fight back against that by making sure this guy here today in the divorce loses everything and doesn't get to see his kids. We punish the fuck out of him, and that's restorative justice. So we're doing the right thing here. Now, this is why you don't have juries in divorce law, because they never get the outcome they want. Now, the outcome they want is 99%, in an ideological outcome. They won't get that if they've got a jury, so they simply don't have one. Instead, they appoint radical activist judges who deliver reliably 99.9% of the time ideologically. And we're seeing this more and more. If you look at the trials Donald Trump was dragged into in New York and so on, they had no trouble finding an activist judge and finding an activist jury that would reliably convict, even though the case was as flimsy as fuck. They still got the conviction. So it also illustrates here that once you put ideology into law, you've automatically gutted it and undermined it and corrupted it and perverted it to a point where it's very difficult to recover it from this point. Then you add the tribalism of these third world people and the racial identity and all that racial solidarity, and they don't care about the facts. The facts are just white man's bullshit, and the only issue is their tribal and racial solidarity. That's all that matters. Because after all, the law is white man's law, white man's court, white man's police, white man, white man, white man, and they're just sticking up for their own people against the oppression of the evil white man. Well, why did you come to the white man's country if you feel that way? So we could steal everything we could lay our hands on, of course, you idiot. So now, when you look at jury trials going back, say, into the 1800s in Britain, or even a little bit earlier than that, the juries where the death penalty was involved, courts found it very difficult to get the jury to convict. Now, these were the days of the village sort of thing, where people didn't really travel more than a few miles, from their village. So the people who were in the jury all knew the accused or the defendant, so they would have known them, or at least known of them. And again, this is in the days of people just not moving around to anywhere near the extent they did. And it was very hard for the courts and the authorities to get a conviction if the death penalty was on there. Even if it was life imprisonment and things like that, they still struggled because it was seen that where the upper class were oppressing the lower class rather than an act of justice. So harsh penalties, in this case, death by hanging or something, harsh penalties were so even back then the British authorities thought, gee, we don't need this jury thing. It's really getting in the way of what we want to do. But the reality is that the jury system, for all its faults, and it's got them, by the way, is it perfect 100% of the time? Absolutely not. But for all its faults, the objective, completely impartial, independent judge, non-ideological, apolitical judge and jury are absolutely key in the functioning of a Western justice system. Now we're not doing it. We're trashing it. That's what we're subverting it, perverting it, corrupting it at the moment. And I think that's a tragic step, because once you go beyond, there's no juries anymore, then the globalists can insert activist judges everywhere and get every verdict that comes out as the verdict they want, based on their own political power requirements. I mean, do we want that? I would say no. Similarly, do we want a situation where tribal groups, Indians or Pakistanis, whoever it is, can really just control parts of the legal system? And if you end up going accused of something, and you've got a jury that's mainly made up of Pakistanis, they're going to look at you as you're the evil white oppressor. We want to make sure you go down, motherfucker. Do we want that? No, we don't. And so we need to revisit what's happening to our legal system and accept that the jury system of law, of legal practice, that cannot exist in parallel to mass migration and groupings of people that have their loyalty only to their tribal group. They have no understanding or belief in independent authority, as in an independent police and independent court, and they want control of the outcomes. And the only way to do that is to have their own tribal groupings. That's where we're at the moment. Pretty scary stuff. You've been with Tastos today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.